Welcome, dear listener, to the fireside of the mind, where the fog curls like cigarette smoke and every shadow conceals a secret. Tonight we journey to Ashcombe Manor, a crumbling Tudor pile perched on the wind-lashed cliffs of Cornwall in the brittle autumn of 1934. Rain lashes the mullioned windows. The Atlantic roars below like a caged beast. Inside, the chandeliers flicker, the clocks strike 13, and Sir Reginald Ashcombe, shipping magnate and collector of enemies, lies dead in his study, strangled by a crimson silk scarf that once belonged to his late wife. Pour yourself a cognac, draw the curtains, and let us begin. Chapter 1. The crimson scarf, the wind that swept across the cliffs of Cornwall that October evening of 1934 carried more than salt and rain. It bore the lamentations of centuries. Ashcombe Manor, a Tudor fortress of blackened oak and lichen-crusted stone, crouched upon the headland like some ancient beast guarding its hoard. The Atlantic hurled itself against the rocks below in ceaseless fury, each wave a thunderous percussion that rattled the leaded casements and set the chandeliers trembling in their cobwebbed sockets. Within the great hall, a single suit of armour clanged softly in sympathy, as though the ghost of its long-dead wearer still marched to the drum of the sea. It was precisely 11 minutes past midnight when the scream rent the air, a sound so shrill, so primal, that it seemed to slice through the very storm itself. The cry emanated from the west wing, from the sanctum sanctorum of Sir Reginald Ashcombe, shipping magnate, collector of Ming porcelain, and, it was whispered, of human souls. The household, roused from uneasy slumber, converged upon the study door in a flutter of silk dressing gowns and candle flames. Hercule Poirot, who had arrived but 3 hours earlier at the urgent telegram of his old friend Inspector Japp. Murder most foul, come at once, paused upon the threshold. The little Belgian detective, immaculate even at this unseemly hour, in a charcoal overcoat and gloves of the finest kid, surveyed the tableau with the calm precision of a surgeon. His green eyes, bright as peridots, missed nothing. Sir Reginald Ashcombe lay sprawled across his mahogany desk, his corpulent frame contorted in a final, grotesque bow. The crimson silk scarf, once the pride of his late wife, Lady Edith, locked these 10 years in a cedar chest, had been twisted thrice about his bull neck with such violence that the fringe trailed into an open inkwell, dyeing the scarlet threads to near black. His eyes, protuberant and bloodshot, stared sightlessly at the coffered ceiling where cherubs cavorted in faded plaster. One hand still clutched a crystal brandy balloon, shattered. The liquor had pooled beneath his cheek, mingling with the darker stain that seeped from his parted lips. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, twirling the tip of his moustache with a gloved finger. The violence, it is theatrical. Yet, the scarf, La Belle chose. It is knotted with the care of a lover. Curious, non? The room itself was a museum of opulence and decay. Shelves groaned beneath leather-bound tomes on maritime law. A globe the size of a carriage wheel stood sentinel beside a fireplace where logs smouldered to ash. Upon the hearthrug lay the shattered remnants of a Meissen shepherdess, her porcelain head severed clean at the neck, an echo, perhaps, of the corpse's own demise. Most telling were the footprints, small, narrow, heeled, imprinted in the spilled brandy that tracked from desk to French windows. The prints led away from the body toward the terrace where rain lashed the flagstones in silver sheets. Poirot knelt, his nose inches from the rug. Size 5, Louis heel, mud from the orchid house, Le terre rare used for the Cattleya hybrids. Someone walked here in borrowed shoes. He lifted a torn fragment caught beneath the desk. A theatre ticket for the mousetrap, dated the previous evening, the corner stained with the same crimson ink. The door burst open. Inspector Japp, florid and breathless, filled the frame. Poirot, the households in the drawing room, 5 of them, all claiming alibis tighter than a miser's fist. Sir Reginald was alive at 11, dead by 12. The scarf was locked in Lady Beatrice's dressing room. Keys still on her chatelaine. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then let us meet these alibis vivants. The drawing room was a cavern of crimson damask and ancestral portraits whose eyes followed one like the Furies. The suspect stood or sat in attitudes of studied innocence, yet tension crackled like static before lightning. Lady Beatrice Ashcombe, 38, widow for mere minutes, stood by the mantel in an emerald velvet dressing gown that clung to her form like seaweed to a rock. Her raven hair, unbound, cascaded over shoulders that had once launched 1,000 shipping contracts. Her eyes, the color of winter seas, held a glitter that might have been grief or triumph. "Poirot," she said, voice husky from brandy or tears. "I was in the conservatory arranging lilies for the church fete. The gardener, Tremaine, saw me through the glass at 11:30. Ask him." Captain Hugo Vale, 42, Sir Reginald's partner in the Ashcombe line, leaned against the billiard-room door. His monocle flashed. A dueling scar bisected his left cheek like a lightning bolt. "Playing billiards alone," he barked. "The cue chalk is still on my cuffs. Observe." He thrust forward a hand-stained blue-white. Miss Daphne Gray, 24, the secretary, perched on a tapestry stool, spectacles fogged, fingers clutching a stenographer's notebook as though it were a rosary. "Typing correspondence in the library," she whispered. "The ribbon snapped at 11:30. I have the carbon." Mr. Felix Lombard, 29, theatrical producer, lounged in a lavender waistcoat, a nervous laugh bubbling like champagne. Rehearsing monologues in the music room, the gramophone needle scratched La Bohème at the death scene. Most appropriate, n'est-ce pas? Mrs. Pritchard, 55, housekeeper, stood ramrod straight in starched apron, face carved from granite, polishing silver in the pantry. The clock struck 12 as I locked the safe. Sir Reginald's will was inside, signed yesterday. Poirot's gaze swept them like a lighthouse beam. 5 alibis, each with a prop. Yet the scarf walked from cedar chest to corpse, introvable. He turned to Japp, the key to the chest. "Found in the koi pond," Japp grunted, "wrapped in a child's mitten, pink wool, moth-eaten." Poirot's moustache twitched. A mitten, size for a child of 8, yet no children reside here since... He paused, eyes narrowing. "Since Lady Edith's daughter drowned in 1918. Tiens, the past, it bleeds into the present." Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her throat. "That scarf was Edith's. I kept it locked for memory." Captain Vale's monocle dropped. "Memory? You kept the noose that strangled your husband?" "Enough!" Poirot clapped gloved hands. "We reconstruct. Tomorrow, midnight, we return to the study. Each will play their part. The little grey cells, they demand an encore." Outside, the storm redoubled, rain drumming the windows like impatient fingers. In the study, the gas lamp flickered once, twice, then steadied, casting the crimson scarf in a pool of bloodlight that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Somewhere in the attics, a child's laughter echoed, brief, chilling, gone. Poirot closed the study door with a soft click. "The play begins," he murmured, "and the curtain, it is soaked in scarlet." Chapter 2. Footprints in brandy dawn crept over the Cornish cliffs like a thief in grey flannel, muffling the Atlantic's roar to a sullen murmur. Ashcombe Manor stood sodden and sullen, its Tudor chimneys exhaling pale smoke that mingled with the sea mist. Hercule Poirot, wrapped in a camel hair coat and a scarf of impeccable silk, descended the terrace steps with the dainty tread of a cat upon hot bricks. The storm had scoured the flagstones, yet the footprints in spilled brandy remained, preserved beneath the overhang of the study's French windows like fossils in amber. Poirot knelt, magnifying glass poised. Précisément, size 5, Louis Hill, the left slightly worn at the outer edge. Mud from the orchid house, le terre rare, rich in volcanic ash. Only one lady here favors such shoes. He glanced toward the manor, yet the prints lead away from the study, not toward. Someone walked in borrowed plumage. Inspector Japp, nursing a mug of tea strong enough to float a battleship, stomped beside him. Lady Beatrice's shoes, right enough, found them in her dressing room, soles caked with the same mud, but she swears she never left the conservatory. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Swears. Oui, but oaths are like pie crust, made to be broken. Come, we examine the orchid house. The glass house squatted at the garden's end, a cathedral of iron and condensation. Inside, the air hung heavy with the perfume of Catalea and Phalaenopsis, their petals luminous against the gloom. A single white bloom lay crushed upon the gravel path, its throat bruised violet, sap glistening like venom. Poirot lifted it delicately between gloved fingers and inhaled. Bitter almonds, he murmured. Cyanide, mon ami, a poison swift and silent. Yet Sir Reginald was strangled. Why crush the orchid? To mask the scent upon the scarf, perhaps. Japp scratched his chin. Gardner says Lady Beatrice was here at 11:30, arranging lilies. He saw her through the glass, emerald gown, hair loose. No mistake. Poirot's moustache twitched. No mistake. Tiens. Then why is the lily water in the vase fresh, not brackish from last night's rain? Someone refilled it this morning. The gardener lies, or is lied to. They returned to the manor. In the billiard room, Captain Vale's cue lay across the baize, untouched chalk pot beside it. Poirot rubbed a finger across the tip. Clean. He claimed chalk upon his cuffs, yet the pot is virgin. Faux. In the library, Miss Grey's typewriter gleamed. Poirot rolled in a sheet, struck a key. The ribbon, pristine indigo, advanced smoothly. She spoke of a snapped ribbon at 11:30. This ribbon is new, installed today. Encore faux. The music room yielded a gramophone, its needle resting upon Carmen, not La Bohème. A scratch marred the record at the habanera, precisely where a dramatic pause would fall. Mr. Lombard rehearsed death, but to the wrong score. The pantry clock, a solemn mahogany regulator, ticked 17 minutes slow. Mrs. Pritchard's polishing cloth lay folded beside a silver salver, the Ashcombe crest gleaming, yet the safe door stood ajar, its combination lock spun to 1918, the year of the drowned child. Poirot's eyes narrowed. The clock is manipulated. Mrs. Pritchard left the pantry at 11:30, not 12. She saw something. Japp produced the sodden mitten from the koi pond. Pink wool, moth-eaten, a single crimson thread snagged in the cuff. Child size, belonged to the little girl what drowned. Creepy, if you ask me. Poirot turned the mitten inside out. A label, faded but legible. F. Lombard, property of the Theatre Royal, Drury Lane. Sacre bleu, our theatrical friend brings props from London. The key to the cedar chest was fished from the pond with this. Voila. In the conservatory, the lilies stood in a crystal vase, water crystal clear. Poirot lifted one bloom, Beneath it, a single white feather, goose down, stained with ink. From a lady's fan, perhaps, or a costume. Lady Beatrice entered, pale in a dove-grey morning gown. You summon me like a schoolgirl, Monsieur Poirot. Madame, your shoes walked to murder. Yet you claim the conservatory. Explain the feather. She touched her throat. My fan, ostrich, a gift from Reginald. I waved it while arranging flowers. The gardener saw. Poirot's smile was thin. The gardener saw a silhouette in emerald, hair loose. But your gown last night was sapphire, hair pinned. Someone impersonated you. Captain Vale burst in, monocle swinging. Impersonation? Preposterous. I was in the billiard room. Alone. Poirot cut in. With no chalk. Miss Grey typed with a new ribbon. Mr. Lombard sang the wrong aria. Mrs. Pritchard's clock lies. And the child's mitten, Le Fantôme, belongs to the theatre. Miss Grey appeared, spectacles askew. I found this in the library grate. She held a scrap of burned paper. Forgive me, Papa. The bad man comes. Child's handwriting, violet ink. Poirot's eyes blazed. The past bleeds. We ascend to the attic. The concealed door behind the library tapestry yawned like a secret mouth. A narrow stair spiraled upward, dust thick as velvet. The nursery lay frozen in 1918. A rocking horse with one glass eye missing, lead soldiers in disarray, a doll's house with its roof askew. Upon the tiny table, a diary bound in faded lilac. Poirot opened it. The last entry, dated 12th of October, 1918. Papa says I mustn't tell about the bad man in the scarf. He hurts Mama when she cries. Tonight I steal Mama's key. I will lock the bad man out. Beneath the diary, a miniature crimson scarf, knotted thrice, identical to the murder weapon. Poirot lifted it. The silk was fresh, not 10 years old. Jap whistled. The ghost child? Non. Poirot said softly. The ghost is summoned. Someone plays the child to terrify, to distract. The mitten, the diary, the scarf, all props. But the footprints in brandy, those are real. And they lead away from the study, toward the cliff path. Outside, the fog thickened, swallowing the manor. Somewhere in the mist, a child's laughter echoed, brief, chilling, then silence. Poirot closed the diary. Tomorrow, midnight, we stage the masquerade. The killer will return to the scene, inevitable. The little grey cells, they are hungry. Chapter 3. The child in the attic. The fog that cloaked Ashcombe Manor the following noon was of the consistency of boiled wool, thick enough to muffle the gulls and turn the cliffs into a void. Hercule Poirot, ensconced in the library with a silver pot of chocolat chaud and a plate of madeleines, pored over the child's diary by the green glow of a banker's lamp. The lilac-bound pages trembled in his gloved fingers. The violet ink had bled in places, yet the childish scrawl remained legible, each loop and dot a cry across 16 years. Papa is angry again. He read aloud to Inspector Japp, who paced before the hearth like a caged bear. He says the bad man will take Mama away if I speak, but I saw the scarf in the cedar chest. It smells of violets and tears. Japp snorted. Little Edith Ashcombe drowned at 8. Body never found, just her pinafore snagged on the rocks. Sir Reginald forbade mention of her name thereafter. Lady Beatrice keeps the nursery locked. Poirot's eyes narrowed to slits. Yet the lock was oiled recently. Le beurre frais. Someone visits the past with regularity. He turned the page. A pressed violet, brittle as parchment, marked the final entry. Tonight the bad man comes. I will hide Mama's key in the rocking horse. Then he cannot hurt her any more. Beneath the diary, Poirot discovered a miniature cedar box, no larger than a match safe, its lid carved with the Ashcombe crest. Inside lay a single brass key, tarnished but functional, the twin to the one found in the koi pond. Tiens, the child kept her promise. But who retrieved the key? Jap produced a folded document from his pocket. Coroner's report on the drowning, 1918. Cause, accidental. But the governess, a Miss Finch, vanished the same week. Rumour said she was with child, Sir Reginald's. Poirot's moustache bristled. A scandal buried deeper than the tide. We ascend. The concealed stair behind the tapestry exhaled dust and the faint perfume of violets. The nursery door stood ajar, a sliver of grey light cutting the gloom. Poirot entered with the reverence of a priest entering a crypt. The rocking horse swayed though no wind stirred. Its remaining glass eye glinted like a tear. Upon the miniature table, the doll's house roof had been lifted. Inside the tiny master bedroom, a porcelain doll lay strangled with a thread of crimson silk. Jap whistled low. Same knot, 3 twists, sailor's hitch. Poirot knelt. Beneath the horse's mane, a hollow cavity yawned. He inserted the brass key. A click and a panel slid aside. Inside, a child's pinafore, yellowed with age, stained with what might have been seawater or blood. Embroidered upon the hem, E.A., beloved daughter. Mon Dieu, Poirot breathed. The child did not drown. She was hidden. But why? Footsteps on the stair. Miss Daphne Gray appeared, spectacles fogged, clutching her notebook like a shield. I couldn't sleep. The attic. I heard crying. Her voice cracked. I was Sir Reginald's byblow. My mother was Miss Finch, the governess. He paid her to vanish, sent me to secretarial college. I came here to watch him, to see if he regretted. Last night, after the murder, I saw a child's shadow on the stairs, small, barefoot, carrying a lantern. Poirot's gaze was gentle but piercing. You saw the past, mademoiselle, or a meticulous recreation. The lantern, describe it. Brass, ship's issue, with a red glass panel, like the one in the study. Jap scratched his head. Study lantern's green glass, always has been. Poirot's eyes blazed. Précisément. Someone substituted the lantern to cast a crimson glow, symbol of the scarf, of blood. The child's shadow is a projection, a silhouette cut from cardboard, moved by wires, le théâtre des ombres. They descended to the study. The French windows stood open. Fog drifted in like incense. Upon the desk, the torn mousetrap ticket had been joined by a single goose feather, identical to the one in the conservatory, now tipped with fresh crimson ink. Poirot lifted it. From a quill pen, not a fan. The ink is cochineal, used in theatrical makeup. Our killer is an artist. In the conservatory, the lilies had been rearranged. 3 white blooms now formed a triangle around a single crimson rose, its petals bruised as though crushed by a child's fist. Beneath the vase, a child's slate, chalked with a crude drawing. A stick figure in a scarf, throat crossed with a red X. Jap paled. The ghost is leaving calling cards. Non, Poirot corrected. The killer leaves misdirection. The child is the perfect red herring, innocent, tragic, untouchable. But observe. He pointed to the slate's corner. A fingerprint in cochineal, adult-sized, the world distinct. Our ghost has grown. Lady Beatrice entered, clad in mourning black, her emerald gown replaced by bombazine. You summon me again, Monsieur Poirot. The village whispers of curses. Madame, the curse is human. Your late husband's will, signed yesterday, leaves $10,000 to a Miss D. Finch, in trust for her issue. You knew. Her hand flew to her pearls. I suspected. Reginald was not faithful, but murder for a bastard's inheritance. Captain Vale stormed in, monocle flashing. Inheritance. The Ashcombe line is bankrupt. Reginald cooked the books, 50,000 embezzled. I confronted him at 11. He laughed, said the sea would swallow his sins. Poirot's smile was thin. And you left him alive? With a bruise to his pride, not his throat. Mr. Lombard sauntered in, lavender waistcoat pristine. Darling Captain, always so physical. I was rehearsing Carmen, the death scene, naturally. The scarf would make a splendid prop. Mrs. Pritchard followed, bearing a tray of tea. Her hands, Poirot noted, trembled. The nursery was my domain once. I locked it after Miss Edith. After the tragedy, no one has the key. Poirot produced the brass key from his pocket. Yet this fits. And the pinafore, your stitching, madame. The tiny roses at the hem. Mrs. Pritchard's face crumpled. I hid the child. Sir Reginald ordered it. Said the scandal would ruin him. Miss Finch fled to France. The girl, she fell from the cliff path. I found the pinafore, nothing more. I kept it for penance. Poirot's voice softened. You kept more than cloth. You kept silence. But silence has a price. Outside, the foghorn moaned. In the attic, the rocking horse swayed again. Creak, creak, though the house was still. Poirot closed his eyes. Tonight, we set the stage. Midnight. The killer will return to perfect the illusion. The little grey cells. They prepare the trap. Chapter 4. The Midnight Masquerade. The grandfather clock in the great hall of Ashcombe Manor struck the first stroke of midnight with the solemnity of a judge's gavel. The house had been transformed into a theatre of shadows, every lamp extinguished save for a single candelabrum upon the study desk, its tapers guttering in a draught that seemed to breathe from the very walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre of the rug, the crimson scarf draped across his gloved hands like a banner of war. Around him, the suspects assembled in masquerade attire, masks of porcelain and velvet, costumes borrowed from the attic's theatrical trove. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot announced, his voice ringing with the clarity of a bell in frost, we reconstruct the crime. Each shall play their part precisely as claimed. The little grey cells demand perfection. Lady Beatrice entered first, emerald velvet replaced by a sapphire gown of 1918 cut, her hair unbound in raven cascades. About her throat she wore a duplicate scarf, crimson silk, but unknotted. She took her place by the French windows, arranging phantom lilies in an invisible vase. Captain Vale followed, billiard cue in hand, chalk pot dangling from his belt. He stationed himself beside the globe, striking a pose of solitary contemplation. Miss Grey, spectacles abandoned, wore a secretary's blouse of starched white and a skirt of midnight wool. She sat at a portable typewriter upon a side table, fingers poised above keys that would never strike. Mr. Felix Lombard swept in, wearing a cloak of midnight blue, a half-mask of gilded harlequin. He carried a gramophone horn under one arm, a wax cylinder in the other. With theatrical flourish he set the needle to Carmen, the habanera, and began to declaim in a voice that trembled between bravado and terror. Mrs. Pritchard, starched apron over a black bombazine gown, bore a silver tray upon which reposed a single crystal goblet filled with brandy, real this time, its surface trembling with each footstep. Poirot raised a hand. Maintenance. The clock strikes 12. The house is silent, save for the storm. Begin. The gramophone spun. Lombard's voice rose. L'amour est un oiseau rebelle. Vale chalked his cue, though the pot remained sealed. Miss Grey typed phantom letters, the carriage bell dinging at precise intervals. Lady Beatrice arranged invisible blooms Humming softly, Mrs. Pritchard polished an imaginary salver, her cloth whispering over silver. At the stroke of 12:15, Poirot clapped once. The candelabrum plunged into darkness. A woman's scream, recorded on the wax cylinder, shattered the silence. The gramophone needle scratched. Blackness absolute. 30 seconds of chaos. Footsteps, a muffled cry, the crash of porcelain. Then Poirot struck a match. The candelabrum flared. Mrs. Pritchard lay upon the hearthrug. The crimson scarf knotted thrice about her throat. Her eyes wide in simulated death. But the knot, Poirot noted instantly, was left-handed, the fringe trailing to the right. "Assez!" Poirot cried. "Lights!" Torches blazed. The suspects froze in tableau. Poirot knelt beside Mrs. Pritchard, who rose with dignified embarrassment. "The knot, mes amis. Observe. 3 twists, sailor's hitch, but executed by a left hand. Who among you is ambidextrous?" Captain Vale's monocle dropped. "I fence with my right, yet you chalk with your left," Poirot interrupted. "Observed yesterday." Miss Grey trembled. "I type with both, but your dominant hand is right. The ribbon advances left to right." Lady Beatrice laughed nervously. "I am right-handed in all things." Mrs. Pritchard folded her arms. "Right, always." All eyes turned to Mr. Lombard. The theatrical producer removed his harlequin mask, revealing a face pale as parchment. "Left-handed, guilty as charged. But I was here, declaiming." Poirot's smile was glacial. "You tied the practice knot with your left hand during the blackout, bravo. But the murder knot was tied with the right. You are not ambidextrous, monsieur. You are a fraud." Lombard's laugh cracked like ice. "Absurd, Poirot produced the child's mitten from his pocket. "Pink wool, label, F. Lombard, property of the Theatre Royal. You fished the cedar key from the pond with this. Your prop from a 1924 production of Peter Pan." The child's laughter. A wax cylinder played through the ventilation grate. Ingenieux. The footprints in Lady Beatrice's shoes. You wore them backward. Heel marks deeper on exit. A classic stage trick. Lombard lunged for the French windows. Captain Vale intercepted with the billiard cue, tripping him neatly. Jap's handcuffs clicked like a curtain fall. "Pourquoi?" Poirot demanded. Lombard spat venom. "Reginald promised 20,000 for the crimson scarf, my masterpiece. Then he laughed, withdrew funding, called it amateur melodrama. I came to confront him, found him alone, drunk, the scarf in his hand. He was burning Edith's letters. I twisted once in rage, then saw the opportunity. The child's legend was perfect cover," Lady Beatrice gasped. "Edith's son, you." "Her bastard," Lombard sneered. "Raised in shame, determined to ruin the family that cast her out. The diary, the pinafore, I planted them. The ghost was my creation." Poirot's voice softened. "You strangled a man for a play, but the play, monsieur, is over." Jap hauled Lombard to his feet. "Felix Lombard, I arrest you for the murder of Sir Reginald Ashcombe." As they dragged him away, Lombard's laughter echoed down the corridor, maniacal, broken. The gramophone needle scratched its final note. Poirot turned to the others. "The masquerade reveals all. The child's shadow was illusion. The true monster wore lavender." Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing the cliffs in stark relief. The sea, for once, was silent. Chapter 5. The Truth in the Tide. The first pale blade of dawn slid across the cliffs of Ashcombe Manor, turning the fog to mother of pearl and the sea to hammered pewter. The storm had spent itself in the night. Only a few shredded clouds drifted like torn curtains above the Atlantic. Hercule Poirot stood upon the terrace, hands clasped behind his back. The crimson scarf, now evidence, tagged and sealed, folded neatly in Inspector Japp's valise. The household gathered in a semicircle, cloaked in the chill of revelation and the salt wind. Poirot's voice, when it came, was soft, yet carried the authority of a cathedral bell. Mesdames et messieurs, the play is ended. The curtain falls, but the epilogue remains. Let us examine the palimpsest of crime, layer upon layer of truth beneath the varnish of lies. He began with the timeline, precise as a Swiss chronometer. Sir Reginald expired at precisely 11:47 p.m. The pantry clock, deliberately set 17 minutes slow, proves Mrs. Pritchard left her station at 11:30, not midnight. She passed the study door, saw the struggle, yet said nothing. Loyalty, madame, can be a heavier chain than guilt. Mrs. Pritchard bowed her head, starched apron trembling. I thought, to protect the house. Poirot turned to the footprints. Size 5, Louis heel, mud from the orchid house. Mr. Lombard wore Lady Beatrice's shoes backward. Heel marks deeper on exit, a stage illusion to implicate the widow. The crushed orchid, sprinkled with cyanide to suggest poison, then discarded. Misdirection. Lady Beatrice's hand flew to her pearls. He used my shoes. Emprunté, madame. Returned before dawn, soles scrubbed, save for the telltale volcanic ash lodged in the stitching. The scarf itself. Poirot lifted the sealed bag. Monogrammed E.A., Edith Ashcombe, the drowned child's mother. Lombard stole it from the attic nursery, not the cedar chest. The chest key in the koi pond. Planted with the mitten, his own prop from Peter Pan. The mitten's label, F. Lombard, Theatre Royal. A signature, non? Miss Grey removed her spectacles, eyes red-rimmed. The diary entries, real. Authentique, Poirot confirmed. Written by little Edith in 1918, hidden in the rocking horse. Lombard discovered them last month while cataloguing the attic for theatrical relics. He forged the final page, the plea for forgiveness, to cast suspicion upon a ghost. Captain Vale's monocle glinted. And the embezzlement. Veritable. Sir Reginald siphoned $50,000 to fund a secret voyage, searching for Edith's body, perhaps, or fleeing creditors. You confronted him at 11:00 p.m., left in rage. Lombard entered at 11:45, found him drunk, burning letters. One twist of the scarf, rage. The second and third, calculation. Mr. Lombard, manacled between two constables, laughed, a hollow sound. He mocked my play, mocked my mother's grave. I gave him a better death scene than he deserved. Poirot's gaze swept the terrace. The motif of the child was genius, the laughter, wax cylinder through the vents, the shadow, cardboard silhouette on wires, the pinafore stained with cochineal, not blood. Even the goose feather dipped in theatrical ink to mimic a quill, a production worthy of Drury Lane. He produced the child's slate from his coat. The chalk drawing of the stick figure with the red X had been smudged, deliberately, by an adult thumbprint in cochineal. The ghost's final message, enough. Lombard's confession, written in the dark. Japp cleared his throat. The will. Poirot unfolded a document. Signed yesterday, witnessed by Mrs. Pritchard. $400,000 to Lady Beatrice, $50,000 to Captain Vale to salvage the Ashcombe line, $10,000 to Miss Daphne Gray, acknowledgement of her mother Miss Finch, and a codicil, the nursery to be converted into a children's ward for the village, funded by the sale of Sir Reginald's Ming porcelain. Atonement, tardif mais sincère. Lady Beatrice's voice broke. He knew about Felix, Edith's son, kept photographs in the Globe's secret drawer. He was trying to make amends. Miss Grey stepped forward, tears glittering. My mother died in France, penniless. This legacy, it rights a wrong. Mrs. Pritchard spoke at last, voice gravel. I hid the child's pinafore for 16 years. Thought it penance. It was cowardice. Poirot inclined his head. Madame, the tide washes all clean, eventually. He turned to the sea. The fog had lifted entirely. The cliff stood stark against a sky of delicate rose. Below, the cove where little Edith vanished glimmered like a mirror. Poirot descended the path alone, the others watching from the terrace. At the water's edge, he drew from his pocket the miniature crimson scarf, the child's prop from the nursery. He weighted it with a pebble, cast it into the waves. The silk bloomed once like a poppy, then sank. Adieu, petit fantôme, he murmured. Your story ends here. Back at the manor, the household dispersed. Lady Beatrice ordered the nursery stripped, its contents boxed for the village children. Captain Vale telephoned London to salvage the shipping line. Miss Grey accepted the legacy with quiet grace. Mrs. Pritchard resigned, taking only her apron and a single violet from the conservatory. Poirot and Japp lingered in the study. The desk had been cleared. Only the globe remained, its secret drawer now empty. Poirot spun it gently. Europe, Africa, the Americas, until it halted on Cornwall. The little grey cells, he said, sipping cocoa from a porcelain cup. They detest melodrama, yet sometimes the theatre of crime demands an encore. Lombard will hang. Justice, not vengeance. The child's laughter will trouble Ashcombe no more. Japp grunted. And the scarf. Burned in the orchard at dawn. Silk to ash, secret to smoke. Poirot's eyes twinkled, though I kept one thread, crimson, naturally, a reminder that even the finest illusion frays under scrutiny. Outside, the sun climbed higher, gilding the manor's stones. The Atlantic, for the first time in days, lay calm as glass. Somewhere in the village, a church bell tolled 9, clear, resonant, a sound of beginnings. Poirot raised his cup in salute. À la vérité, my friend, and to the tide, which carries all away.